founding director and founding head of the college system.
So good afternoon and welcome to all of the family and friends who are here to celebrate this really, I think, wonderful moment for you. I'm, as the dean said, Erica Goldstein. I'm currently the acting vice dean for academic affairs, and I direct the college system and head the Rainier College. And it's a genuine pleasure for me to introduce the keynote speaker this afternoon, Dr. Steve McGee. Dr. McGee gave the commencement address at the medical school quitting ceremony in the spring. He's a faculty member at the School of Medicine and has worked at the Seattle Puget Sound VA Medical Center for the last 25 years. Dr. McGee is a graduate of Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis and completed his internship, residency, chief residency, and fellowship in infectious diseases here at the University of Washington School of Medicine. But he's especially important to me, and this is not in the script because the folks who wrote it didn't know this. He was actually my resident during my internship in the first month I spent at the VA, and I will forever be indebted to him, and he will hold a high place in my heart for that. But he was also one of the best teachers I ever met, even at the medically young age of a second-year resident. We had what will be for any internal resident, a dream team of Dr. Jan Hirschman, who was a remarkable teacher of medicine, and Dr. McGee. Steve McGee is the quintessential clinical educator who truly loves medicine, loves students, and loves teaching, and loves patients. He has won multiple teaching awards, all well-deserved, and conducts superb bedside rounds twice a week at the VA with medical students and chief residents. His primary research interest is physical diagnosis, the art of the physical exam, the art and the science of the physical exam. How to teach it well, how to perform it, its accuracy, its appropriate use, and has published many journal articles about physical diagnosis, and has a textbook entitled Evidence-Based Physical Diagnosis that I strongly recommend to you. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Steve McGee.
This is a day of celebration because today all of you are becoming clinicians, and you have spent 2 years, just as Dr. Ramsey said, in the classroom, studying and mastering the basic sciences, the mechanisms of disease, but now you're making the step to go to the patient's bedside, and you're doing that with a single purpose in mind, and that is to take everything you have learned and make it something of value for your patients. 33 years ago, I was in your shoes. It's a day I remember very well. My first clinical assignment as a third-year student was on the internal medicine wards. I was all set. I had my white coat clean and freshly dressed. I showed up on the wards a little anxious, but very eager. I had my stethoscope, my reflex hammer. I even had 2 vials, one with pipe tobacco and one with mint to test the sense of smell. My pockets were just to the brim with books. I had memorized all the 10 causes of chest pain. I was set, or so I thought. I remember now, and somewhat sheepishly, my first write-up. About 6 pages into it, and don't ask me what possibly could fill 6 pages. I started recording the physical exam. And I was in the eye exam, and this is what I wrote. The patient was positioned upright with undilated pupils. She was examined with a black, well-shown, pocket ophthalmoscope. Model number 6. Eyes were normal. So you can see I had really no idea what I was doing, but this is not your situation. You have to know, the students here have to know that you really are the envy of other medical students in our country, thanks principally to your mentors, college system, I really can't think of another group of students who is better prepared to take this step to the patient's bedside than you all are here today. And what I'd like to do is just briefly stop and ask all of your friends, families, faculty here to give you a hand to acknowledge this accomplishment. So what I want to do in just the next several minutes is take you back to a period almost 100 years ago and tell you a story. And this is a story of one of our own schools, University of Washington graduates, who later became probably one of the most celebrated clinicians in American medicine from the last 100 years. This person is Dr. Paul Beeson. In true Wanny fashion, Dr. Beeson spent his early life here in the Northwest. He was born in 1908 in Livingston, Montana. He spent his entire childhood in the frontiers of Alaska, living in a log cabin in Anchorage, next to the hospital where his father was chief surgeon for the Alaskan Railroad. Now, Beeson learned early on what it really means to be devoted to patients, because he learned this from watching his father. In fact, his father possibly made the longest house call ever when, in 1921, he mushed by dog sled over snow and ice over 1,100 miles from Anchorage to Iditarod and back to take care of a single patient, a banker who was ill with tuberculosis. Paul Beeson left Alaska. He came to Seattle. He did his undergraduate work here. He did his medical work at McGill. And then in the summer of 1935, he went into general practice. This makes him possibly the only person who was later to go on and become a department chair, an academic giant, possibly the only person with this future ahead who actually began his life in general practice. In general practice, he worked very hard, making hospital rounds, house calls. He later said that he charged $2 for an office visit, $3 for a house call, unless it was in the middle of the night. It was $5. He spent hours talking to patients, listening to their concerns, honing his bedside skills. And this must have been fundamental for Beeson, because later in his life, he always measured a clinician's ability by how well they listened to their patients, asked the right questions, and took care of their patients' concerns. At the beginning of World War II, Beeson was abruptly made chief physician of a field hospital, a Red Cross hospital in England. This is a hospital that was set up to take care of predicted outbreaks of diseases. And one of the points I want to leave you about Beeson is this is a person whose clinical life was entirely unpredictable. But he always seemed to take every opportunity and make it a very productive one. As soon as he arrived in England, he was faced with the epidemic of eosinophilia. Now, the eosinophil is a white cell that circulates, but it's got a real pretty red color. The students know this, but for others. And he quickly determined that the cause was trichinosis, a parasite. He found the source of that, and he interrupted the outbreak. But this spawned his interest in the eosinophil, and later he became the world's expert on the eosinophil. While he was in England, he took care of a large outbreak of meningococcal meningitis, thousands of patients. Coincidentally, at the same time antibiotics were just becoming available, he used these to treat these patients, published his experiences in British Medical Journal. This made him the international expert in the use of antibiotics and meningitis, and many of the principal students that you have learned about the importance of antibiotics and meningitis come from this paper. The other thing about Beeson is he was always inquisitive about patients, especially those patients whose symptoms just did not quite fit into the established categories that you've learned about. While he was in England, he and his colleagues attempted to stop these recurrent outbreaks of mumps that were getting British recruits as they were coming into the army. Every spring, a bunch of soldiers would come down with mumps. So he used a technique that he knew was successful in measles. What he did is he took serum from soldiers who had convalesced from mumps and injected it into the new recruits. And indeed, he was very successful. He did stop these recurring mumps outbreaks. But Beeson also noticed that 1 out of every 3 of these soldiers who received injections later developed hepatitis. Now, clinicians at that time knew about hepatitis, but the hepatitis they knew about was foodborne. You ingest the food, and then you get hepatitis 2 to 4 weeks later. What he noticed is that these soldiers' hepatitis was 8 to 12 weeks later. And furthermore, many of these soldiers had hives or urticaria, which was not a feature of foodborne hepatitis. So he reasoned these have to be separate diseases. And this led him to publish a classic paper in JAMA in 1943, which is the very first description distinguishing foodborne hepatitis, what we now call hepatitis A, from serum hepatitis, what we now call hepatitis B. After the war, Beeson returned to the United States, quickly established his credentials as a brilliant clinician, teacher, researcher, academic leader. He became chair of medicine at Emory in Atlanta. Then he became chair of medicine at Yale School of Medicine. There's actually a ward there named for him. And finally, he went on to become an Nuffield Professor of Medicine at Oxford. At Emory, this is a clinician, made a very important scientific contribution, and that is the discovery of endogenous pyrogen. Well, what is endogenous pyrogen? Clinicians had known for a century that if you inject a person with something from without them, something exogenous, like serum or bacteria, you produce a fever. And so it would be called a pyrogen, produces fever. So these were all called exogenous pyrogens. But he asked simply the question, why is it that so many non-infectious disorders without anything exogenous, also are characterized by fever? He reasoned there has to be something endogenous, capable of causing fever. And he eventually extracted the substance from rabbit inflammatory cells and found this by producing fever in healthy rabbits, and he published it in the JCI, calling it endogenous pyrogen, which was its name until 1979, when the international community changed its name to interleukin-1. So Beeson, a clinician, is the discoverer of the world's very first cytokine, interleukin-1.